Welcome to episode 8 of Media Conversations with Malik Cooper. I'm your host, Malik Cooper, and today I'm joined by former broadcast professor at Francis Marion University and veteran sports broadcaster, Dr. Gary Griffith. Dr. Griffith, how are you doing this morning?
Doing very well. Thank you very much, Malik, for having me on.
It's great to have you here. And as I looked over your extensive resume, what jumped out to me was that you were the radio play-by-play announcer for the 2016 College World Series champion, Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. And after they won, Chanticleers were actually selected in the MLB draft. So for you as the radio announcer, I just wanted to know what you noticed that made that team so great.
Well, I had done work for Coastal on and off, it seems like 10 or 12 or 15 years. And in 2016, I did most of their games as I remember, and was very honored to do that. The player, what struck me about that team, this is going back 6 years now, and I didn't know a lot of them personally, I will admit that. You know, I would just kind of go do the games and move on, is they were a cohesive unit, and they were just a darn good baseball team around the infield. Let's see if I can remember. Some of the players had a local kid named G.K. Young at first. Zach Remillard was at third. He, to my knowledge, Remellard's the only one from that team still playing professional baseball. I believe he's with the AAA Charlotte Knights. They had a shortstop named Michael Paez, who was a very high draft pick of the Mets and played a couple of years. And then a guy from the Charleston area whose name escapes me at second base. They had speed in the outfield. They had some very good pitching, just top to bottom, everything that you want to go right went right for that team that year, plus a very experienced coaching staff. And they were just a darn good baseball team. And they were confident, and they went to Omaha, and I believe they played the maximum 5 elimination games, which is incredible. Stayed the entire 2 weeks, beat the University of Arizona, and became national champions. It was quite an honor to be part of it. And how that unfolded, I'll tell you quickly. I told you I'd worked doing their games, and I had agreed to go to West Virginia to work a collegiate summer league team up there. So at the end of, Coastal played NC State in the regionals. They won it. So they went to the super regionals down at LSU. Well, I had already told West Virginia I was coming up, so I thought, well, I'll go on up there. And I did. Everybody, the common wisdom or what people were forecasting is that Coastal would go down to LSU, and there was no way they were going to win that super region. So I go on up to West Virginia, and Coastal goes to Baton Rouge and beats LSU twice to go to the College World Series. And I remember I was on the team bus with that team in West Virginia. I believe they were up in Ohio. And Matt Hogue, the athletic director at Coastal, called me, and I'm paraphrasing, said, okay, can you come do the games? Would you come do the games? And I was actually almost hesitating. And I remember one of the coaches on the team said, you've got a chance to go to the College World Series, wise up. And he was right. That was, I believe, a Tuesday night. The team drove back from Ohio 4 or 5 hours to West Virginia, slept a few hours, got up, came home on Wednesday, and got on the charter with Coastal that Thursday and flew out to Omaha. And as I said, they stayed 2 weeks and won the College World Series.
I'm sure that was a fantastic experience for you. And, you made the right decision going to broadcast the College World Series. Staying on the topic of Coastal's baseball team, they've had the same coach for the past 26 years now, with Coach Gary Gilmore having been there since 1996. And during that time, he's made 14 NCAA tournament appearances, and of course, he won that national title in 2016. So you said you didn't really have a relationship with the players on that team, but did you have a relationship with Coach Gilmore? And was there an aura about him from having 26 years of equity built with that program, or I guess 20 at the time?
I know Gary, not intimately. I think he would know me if I walked up to him now. We got to know each other a little bit. I'd say on a professional level, for a better lack of terms, because I would interview before the games. But different from minor league baseball. I worked a lot in minor league baseball where you're with a team. In those days, 140 games, you get to know the coaches, you get to know the players a little bit better. You build up more of a history with them. But Garry has been there, I think you said, since 1994. The aura about him, if I can use that, or you use that word, is just, he's been around. He's confident and knows what he's doing. And in sports, coaches come and go very readily, very quickly.
Right.
And Garry has kept a coaching staff in place for a number of years, which is pretty rare. And I know helps in recruiting and helps with the continuity. When he goes into a home or one of his coaches and can say to players, look, my coaches, say you're a pitcher, my pitching coach has been with me X amount of years, or the hitting coach X amount of years. We've built up this resume. I would think it gives parents and players a great sense of confidence to know that about Gary Gilmore and his staff over at Coastal.
Besides covering college baseball, you also have more than a decade of experience calling professional minor league baseball, like you said. And the minors are notorious for having somewhat subpar working conditions for their employees, especially at the lower levels. So can you take me and the audience through your personal experience with working games for the minor leagues? And then also, if as you go up from single A to double A and so forth, if the conditions got better for you?
Yes is the short answer. I actually started very low level, jumped to double A and been back. I've been across the whole spectrum of minor league baseball, except for the triple A level, but announcing is kind of announcing. The game is the game. The low minor leagues, you're still on buses. Double A, you're still on buses. But I would hear stories from the older coaches about what it used to be years ago, where they would play 100 and whatever, 30, 40 games and maybe not even have a day off. The conditions have improved a little bit, maybe a lot, depending on who you talk to. The meal money, I can't speak to what they give these guys now. Things like that. Hotels are pretty nice, the ones I encountered at all levels. Working with the staff, both part-time and full-time. We all got along very well. I don't remember any really bad situations in minor league baseball. I got close with a couple of coaches, a man named Randy Engel, who I was with 4 years in Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach at that time was a high advanced A level of the Atlanta Braves. When you're around a man like Randy Engel, who literally gave 30, 35 years of his life to the Atlanta Braves, you really get to know and appreciate and learn from guys like that. Now at the AAA level, from a player's perspective, the salaries are pretty good. I don't know specifically, but more and more players are able to kind of make a career of it if they want to do that. Of course, their ultimate goal for all of them is to be a Major League Baseball player. Local fans think, well, why did I don't know if Columbia, South Carolina still belonged to the Mets, or Myrtle Beach is with now the Cubs. Or, maybe local fans say, gee, why did they take Malik Cooper and send him up? Well, they're looking from a local level. If you and I are running the Atlanta Braves or the New York Yankees, we're looking from the up above level of the organization. And for a player, their goal is not to be in Richmond, Virginia or Columbus, Ohio. It's to be in the major leagues. And of course, situations there change completely.
You talked about how you get to know these minor league organizations on a much more personal level than you did the college teams. And I just wanted to know if that changed the way that you broadcasted the games for either one.
A little bit. Like I said, you get to know someone, a coach, like I mentioned, a man named Randy Engel, you get to be friends with him. We were friends. We still are friends. But when the game started, he's doing his professional job. I'm doing my professional job. And I could objectively call the game. But Randy Engel was not, or is not, one of these individuals that's going to come out and just argue a call just for the heck of it, just to get on, a YouTube or something like that. And I always knew that. Well, I learned that about Randy, where he just knew what he was doing. So I could cover the team objectively. I really could. Whatever team I was covering, and I did, even though, let's say I'm covering X team and I know you, Malik Cooper, we get to know each other. I'd have to say to your face, well, Malik, you struck out 4 times tonight, and quite frankly, you chased some bad pitches. That's just reality, you know. Now, don't get into these personal attacks or any of that type. I did not do that. From a broadcasting perspective, some really, tough situations all through the minor leagues, what you have to go through to get that final product, which is on the air or streaming as it has been the last 10 or 20 years. And I can address that if you want to, but we can leave that for the moment.
Okay, then. All your experience with baseball over the years, of course, culminated in your 2012 book, Meandering Through the Minor Leagues. What inspired you to write this book, and what was the process of putting it together like?
Both the inspiration and the process, a lot of it came from a man named Ray Worm. Ray was a retired baseball coach and history teacher from Long Island, retired to Myrtle Beach, and he ran the electronic scoreboard at the Myrtle Beach Pelicans baseball park, probably 20 years. He died last year in 2021, and I had written, I think 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, articles once a week for a local newspaper during the season, so April to September. And Ray, along the way, once in a while would say, you need to compile all of this and put it in a book. And some years later, I did exactly that. I was fortunate that I had saved a lot of those articles. And those articles were not about the minutia of the game. I left that to the beat writer. So none of those articles I wrote were Malik went 3 for 4 and drove in 2 runs. It was more in the world of baseball at the time, seeing it as a way to look at individuals and situations. So I had articles, or there are articles in that book. One I still remember called the Cheesesteak Chronicles, because in the Philadelphia area, they're known for their cheesesteaks. Well, Myrtle Beach would play a team in Wilmington, Delaware, right next door. And I struck up a friendship with a gentleman out on the concourse at the ballpark. As I remember, he was an architect or an engineer during the day or something like that, but ran this little kiosk making cheesesteaks at night. We struck up a conversation. I'd stop by, and he would give me a couple of really hot cheesesteaks after the game. They were wonderful. So I wrote an article called the Cheesesteak Chronicles about him. There are articles in that book that don't even have anything to do necessarily with baseball. I believe I've got one in there about a lifeguard that I bumped into here in North Myrtle Beach. I had worked on the beach as a beach services manager, and there was a lifeguard that I noticed who was considerably older than everyone else. And I eventually wound up thinking, well, there's a story, and there was. So that article was in the book. I also had the encouragement of my wife she also would say, you need to write more, even to this day. And at that time, back to Francis Marion, I was coming up for tenure. That also helped me, was a catalyst to pull that book together, to put it in my dossier as I went up for that promotion. And the book is still available on Amazon. It's called One Announcer's Thoughts, Meandering from Myrtle Beach to Montana. It's a mouthful.
It's a perfect title, if you ask me. And those stories that you got, the lifeguard and all the other ones that you compiled into that book, make me want to ask and think about how your job covering these minor league teams, because I saw on your resume that you were also doing sales for teams like the Myrtle Beach team that you were with. So you're covering the games, you're writing, and then not all the time even writing for baseball. And then you've got the friendships and personal relationships that you're talking about. It just seems like you gain a lot of different experiences and wear a lot of different hats when you're working with minor league organizations.
You just concisely gave the job description of working in the minor leagues.
It's a lot.
Let me circle back to that in a minute, because, let me just start with, I was talking to a friend of mine named Gary Saunders, who I worked with at the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. Gary has been working 30 years in minor league and college sports. He doesn't anymore full time. He works part time for a team in Florida. But he was telling me the other day that there's really not as much emphasis, he seems to think, on sales today as there was, and there still should be, because sales is what, everything is supported on sales.
Right.
NCAA, college, you name it. You've got a local TV, a newscast. That's advertising. Sales works. So in the minor leagues, I've heard this from so many people that, you have to wear several hats. Take, for instance, in Myrtle Beach, where I work, I was hired to do the radio broadcast. And little by little, I thought, well, I've got to kind of do some sales here. And I just kind of not made up, but created my sales position. I worked doing group sales for a couple of years. The other extreme of that is, I found in the minor leagues, I always thought they had to be careful not to make a square peg go into a round hole, so that not everybody is a salesman. I mentioned Gary Saunders, great salesman. So if it were my world and I was the boss, I would say, let Gary concentrate on sales, not on radio. If Malik is our radio broadcaster, let's let him concentrate on that and maybe try some radio sales. So it worked both ways, but sales was the backbone of my experience in minor league baseball. And if people could say, well, yeah, I can sell for you, I'll at least try. I think a lot of general managers are very open to listening to people.
Did this transition of sales not being as important happen while you were still covering minor league baseball?
Well, I can't say that it's not important. I'm sure it still is. I'd have to almost guess it still is. No, it's just, I think it's still emphasized no matter where you go. And if you had the time to interview 25 minor league general managers across the country, I'm pretty sure they'd say sales is important. Yeah.
Right. Okay, then. Well, we talked a lot about your broadcasting career, but I haven't talked much about Dr. Griffith, the professor at Francis Marion University. So why don't you tell me a little about your fondest memories with that specific job?
The one is just the way it unfolded. I was working here for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans full time, and I had called a man named Don Stewart, who was the department chair of the communications department at Francis Marion.
Yeah,
I've done this over the years. Kept my hand in teaching, and I remember asking Don, "Hey, do you need a part-time, whatever, speech professor?" Nothing ever materialized, and then one summer, he called and said, "Can you come out and speak to the sports class I have?" I said, "Sure." I went out there, and I don't remember the specifics, but I think Don said, "Well, would you like to take a couple of part-time classes?" I said, "Sure, man." I think he gave me 2. Seems like the next day he called up and said, "Can you take 4, which is a full load?" And I did. So that first year I was full-time, part-time, but I had a full teaching load. And then was offered the job full-time and just kind of transitioned into it. Didn't really, I never formally interviewed at Francis Marion where I have at other places. So it was a nice transition right into it, and it was a good experience. Other fond memories, you think of students, if you've had along the way, Armand Brody, who put us together. Yeah. You remember students like that, good students like Armand, who still keeps in touch, and a couple of others do too. So just a general, pleasant memory of how it unfolded and how my time there, it was a good time. It was a pleasant time. My department got along very well, so I was very blessed.
For you personally, was it ever a dream of yours to be a major league broadcaster?
Oh, sure. I think, if I'm going to be completely honest, which I hope I am, the goal, let me put it to you like this. It took me a while. and I'm not sure I've really got a handle. We tend to see careers on a trajectory. In other words, if you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, whether you have to go to college, you have to go to medical school, you have to pass your boards, and then you can replace my knee.
Right.
In announcing, and most announcers I think would tell you this, it's up and down. There's no straight shot here or there. So if one has their sights absolutely set that I have to be an announcer for the Baltimore Orioles, and I don't realistically know that 1 in 5,000 people might get that job, then you're kind of fooling yourself. Yet at the same time, you want to have goals set up. I have come to realize that here's your corporation. Your corporation says IBM or Francis Marion University, and you teach in the corporation, or you work for IBM, or you teach at Francis Marion. Announcing has become the corporation. And I remember kind of hearing these reverberations from coaches who would say, well, I'm a baseball lifer. I work in baseball. And I would think the same thing. Gee, don't you want to be with the Atlanta Braves or with the New York Yankees? And some of them would. But their career was baseball, and they were working in baseball. And my wife brought that up in years past. I've slowly kind of embraced that theory or that way of living. So I try to see whatever opportunities I have in announcing, they're in announcing. You go back to the College World Series. I was sitting there in Omaha. That place seats 26,000 people. It was full. And you're acutely aware that you're at the College World Series. You look down and go, yikes, this place is full. But it will humble you. 48 hours, 72 hours later, I was back with that team in West Virginia. They were playing somewhere where there were maybe 30 people in the stands. But the job was announcing. And that's what I've come to realize. So sure, I mean, if the Yankees or Clemson, if they call me, of course I'm going to listen. I'm capable of doing the job. I would love to have these discussions, but I'm not hanging my entire existence on this or that or this or that, because if the Lord unfolds that in my life, I think I'll be ready for it maybe now, maybe more than say 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So, but sure, I had aspirations. I mean, I still have aspirations. I'm working a college baseball tournament this weekend, and it will be held in a minor league park that probably seats 10,000 people. I doubt there'll be 10,000 people there.
Right.
But I'll give it just my best effort, as if it were, you go back to the example of the low minor leagues where I've worked, or the highest minor leagues, or the highest collegiate level. If you're fortunate enough to be given those opportunities, I should say I'm trying to look at it much more and more like that.
Me personally, I can relate to that, because when I was younger, obviously the first thing I wanted to do, I've talked about this multiple times on this podcast. My first dream was I wanted to be an NBA player, but then you realize that job is literally 1 in a million, And then obviously, I grew up and I realized I wasn't 6'5". Then next, it's like, oh, well, I enjoy putting the teams together on 2K. I'm everybody thinks they're an aficionado now. I know I could be the GM of the Celtics. I could put the team together better than Danny Ainge could. Look at the team now. We have no size. We haven't had bigs for years. We've had no bigs since Kevin Garnett left. What's up with that? And that's just what you think of. And then it's like, there are only 30 of those jobs in the world. So you move past it. And like you said, you just want to get into the industry. And if you're working in that industry for an extended period of time, I think you'll be happy with that. So I just wanted to say I completely relate to what you're talking about.
Well, I have not seen you play basketball, but I'm going to take your word for it. You might.
No, you don't want to. Decent at best. Better than a random.
But you touch on something that I think takes introspection or soul searching, whatever cool word you want to come up with, to realize who you are, who I am. I mean, over the years, I've come to realize, I would not make a good CEO. I wouldn't be I couldn't be a medical doctor because I don't have any science or background. But I've come to realize over the years that in communications, and I use that word broadly, that's kind of where it seems I feel. And I use communication broadly as in teaching or writing or broadcasting. So I think you have to have that you know, you have to take that self-inventory. In fact, I have a book called The Art of Sportscasting, which I used in classes. And it doesn't even read like a textbook. It's a very nice read. Getting a little dated now. I think it's about 20 years old. But in that book, the author, Tom Hedrick, and I'm paraphrasing, says you have to kind of assess yourself and ask yourself some tough questions. Like, can someone listen to me for 2 hours? And he says you have to get honest critiques from others. And that's difficult to do, to assess yourself and have someone else assess you. So you do have to have certain skills, no matter what it is. You know, to be a doctor, of course, you got to have certain skills. And to be a broadcaster, you do have to have those skills, which I'm jumping off what you said about, you know, all kids say, I want to be an NBA player, I want to be a major league player, I want to be a, you know, NFL quarterback. Then they begin to realize, well, honestly, I can't. You know, I don't have those skills.
You just talked a lot about introspection and knowing yourself, and how you have to honestly assess yourself and think about, are people going to be enjoying listening to me? Do I have the skills necessary to perform well in this field? And I went through the same thing in high school as I was sort of thinking about, what side of this profession do I want to go to? Do I want to be in sports on camera? Do I want to be in front of the camera? Do I want to be calling games? Do I want to be behind the scenes? Do I want to produce? So I went through exactly what you're talking about right now, and I'm still going through that process. You know, as I transfer to Winthrop this year, I'm going to be using that time a lot for what you just talked about, introspection, maybe get a radio show and see if I can handle those responsibilities. But when did you personally know that you had it for communications, that you knew this is what I'm good at and this is what I can do with my life?
Years ago, I was working on a master's of theology at Duke Divinity School. I had plans to do a doctorate in biblical studies or New Testament studies, something like that. I was rejected everywhere I applied. In that period, my wife and I still kind of joke about it, but maybe she's responsible. I think she said, why don't you go over to this station and, you know, whatever, volunteer. It's still there. I think it's called WCHL. I think it is still the anchor station for University of North Carolina sports. It's on Franklin Street in Chapel. I think it still is. So I go over there unannounced, because in your naivete, you think, I'll just do whatever. Go in there, say, gee, look who's here to help you. And I remember, I guess he was the sports director, kind of looking at me like, I don't think you get it here, son. You know, we don't really need your help. But I remember the guy said, wait a minute, would you like to do a 5-minute pre-recorded report on Duke football? You've heard this before, you know, all these pre-games come on now, they last 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 hours. And maybe there's a segment in there that goes, let's go around the SEC, let's go around the ACC, and they do a little, you know, report, and it would go something like this. Maryland is playing North Carolina State today. Here's Malik Cooper with a report, and you come on. Well, he gave me that assignment for Duke. I would go in, pre-recorded, you know, here with a report on Duke playing Maryland is Gary, Griffith. Now, that's a long intro, and I remember the first night I went in there, there was a young lady there, maybe recording me, and she said something to the effect, gee, you're good at this, you can do this. And I always remember that. And I never lacked kind of thinking maybe before I could do it. A lot of oral and verbal skills inherited from my mom. She was great. But since that point, it began to build on itself, but it still keeps you humble. This is my opinion. There are still days where you go, do I want to do this? Am I capable of doing that? You know, questions that people ask themselves over and over and over. But you do have to have some confidence helped out by other people. You have to get people's feedback. Don't rest on your laurels, but know what you're capable of doing. And like I said, I'm not going to run a big corporation, and I'm not going to do a lot of things, but I'm capable of doing this. And any opportunities that come along, whether I seek them or they find me out, I'm very grateful for, and try to keep that very much in the forefront. Do not take this for granted. Like, oh wow, everybody should be calling me. Don't they know who I am? No. Try to be really, really acutely aware of what a privilege it is, and do the best you can. But you have to have that confidence. I should say, and you have to have the confidence.
Very, very well said. Always stay humble. Lastly, you've broadcasted baseball, football, and basketball at high school, college, and professional levels for decades. And out of everyone you watched, I just need to know who the best players you've broadcasted live are. And some potential candidates I thought of are the 3-time MLB All-Star shortstop Rafael Furcal, who was with the Myrtle Beach Pelicans that you covered, and at the Atlanta Braves, 2019 All-Star second baseman with the Los Angeles Angels, Tommy LaStella, who of course was a graduate of Coastal Carolina.
Furcal literally was with the Pelicans half a season, not long at all. But even then, the hype, he lived up to it. I remember he could steal bases. I mean, he made a difference in the game. And next thing I know, he's in the major leagues and off and running. Tommy LaStella, I don't remember that much. Like I said, I kind of go drop in like a hired gun, do the games. Tommy LaStella, I think, was playing last year. He may still be playing this year. But someone you didn't mention, Jeff Francoeur, who is now a broadcaster with the Atlanta Braves, I saw him. Oh gosh, if I mention all the ones I saw, in fact, I came across a list from a team in Tennessee that I broadcast one time of just how many players on that team went on to play Major League Baseball. It was astounding. So yeah, I mean, gosh, if I just were to sit here and start scribbling down all the ones I've seen, there have been a lot of, but it's not an exact science. Sometimes you go, gee, I didn't even know that guy was still around and he's a Major League Baseball player, that kind of thing.
Right, of course. I think that's it for episode 8 of Media Conversations with Malik Cooper. For more content like this, you can follow my Instagram at Malik Cooper Media or my Twitter at Malik_Cooper. And as Dr. Griffith said, his book is available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. So if you enjoyed this interview and want to know more about Dr. Griffith, I highly suggest you snag a copy of that book. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with before we go?
Not really. I just hope that everyone listening to this will take encouragement from what you do. And I want to thank you for having me on here. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Of course. You're welcome. Glad to have you here, and hope you all enjoyed episode 8. I will see you all for episode 9 on the 16th. Everyone take care.